started. So thank you all so much for coming out tonight. My name is Michael. I am the events director at Books for Magic, which if you don't know us, we are an independent bookstore just down the road on Smith Street. And if you haven't, I really hope if you do check us out, we're at booksformagic.net and at 225 Smith. So we are really, really excited to host this event. Obviously, it's great to have people in person for an event. But before we get started, I just have a few quick housekeeping notes to get through. First, I want to thank St. Anne's for allowing us to use their beautiful church space for this event. If any of you need to use a restroom at any point, they are through these doors on my right in the room where you checked in the far corner. You should see signs when you get into that room, and that is where you use the restroom. For all of you out in the audience, we'd love if you could keep your masks on and covering both your mouth and nose throughout the entire duration of tonight's event. After the talk, we're going to be doing an audience Q&A for which we're going to line people up in this aisle. So when the time comes, you can get out of your seat and line up if you have a question, and I'll put this microphone in the center aisle here so everyone can hear you. Please keep your mask on when you're asking a question. I know many of you picked up a book when you purchased your ticket, but we also have additional signed copies of Foreverland available for purchase at the table where you checked in as well. With that said, we are not going to be doing a personalization line after the event tonight, but all the books that you have received should already be pre-signed, and let us know if they're not, of course. If you're joining us from the YouTube live stream, hello. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, there is a link in the YouTube description where you can order signed books, and we hope that you will check that link out. All right, so tonight I am excited to introduce Heather Havrilesky and Tom Scocca, who both join us tonight to launch Heather's new book, Foreverland, on the Divine Tedium of Marriage. In Foreverland, Heather delivers an empathetic and inspiringly honest portrait of marriage, both hers and the institution at large. And like the relationships themselves, the book is a rollicking and surprising journey, deftly slicing through preconception to get through to a real and insightful look at marriage. It's a book that Leslie Jamison said in much more eloquent words than mine is, quote, full of razor-sharp, big-hearted wisdom about conflict, lust, obsession, parenting, road trips, daily survival, and the saving, terrifying power of honesty. We can't all be Leslie Jamison. That's just one snippet of the praise about this book, and we can't wait to hear more from Heather about it. Heather Havrilesky writes the popular Ask Polly advice column on Substack, and is the author of What If This Were Enough? How to Be a Person in the World, and Disaster Preparedness. She has written for The New Yorker, The Atlantic, The New York Times Magazine, and NPR's All Things Considered, among others, and also maintains the Ask Molly newsletter written by Polly's evil twin. She lives in Durham, North Carolina with her husband, 2 daughters, and 2 dogs. As I mentioned a minute ago, Tom Scocca is here in conversation with Heather. Tom writes the newsletter Indignity on Substack and is the author of Beijing Welcomes You, the Unveiling the Capital City of the Future, an unpublished middle-grade time travel novel. He has worked at Slate, Gawker, Deadspin, and a series of mostly defunct weekly newspapers. This was not my editorializing, this is in Tom's bio. His writing has appeared in, among other publications, the New York Review of Books, the New York Times, the New York Daily News, and the New York Post. He lives in Manhattan. So we're going to start off with Heather giving us a brief reading. So everyone, please give a very warm welcome to Heather Havrilesky.
Good side, evil side.
Is the right side the good? Which side is good?
That's the host and that's the guest.
This is the guest? Am I the guest? Okay. I definitely want to sit on the evil side. Thank you so much for coming out, everybody here. I know you just came because you want to get a good look at the kind of woman who humiliates her husband in a public square. What does she look like? So I kind of want to just open to a random page and read, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to read the beginning of the book because here we are in a house of God, and we should talk about the sacrament of marriage. See, former Catholic. But listen, my Catholicism has nothing at all to do with the fact that I wrote a book ripping marriage to shreds. Nothing. I honor all sacraments. I did say former Catholic, so that was a tell. Okay, so I'm just going to start from the beginning. Every book about marriage is also a book about mortality, since the success of any marriage is defined not by happiness or good fortune, but by death. The assignment, after all, is to stay together until you die. Once one spouse perishes, the marriage has succeeded. Death signals victory. Only an optimistic fool would declare victory before reaching the finish line. That's what makes weddings such dark comedies. What's more entertaining and ominous than watching two naive souls sign a binding contract without understanding the fine print? Most engaged couples bumble onto the marital bullet train without ever even knowing where it's headed. All that matters is that we'll be together, they whisper to each other. Forever is two immortal elves sipping pink champagne by a fertile stream, then exploring the wild, gorgeous woods. There's my NPR voice. Wild, gorgeous woods around them, in everlasting harmony. Forever is set in New Zealand, not New Jersey. Muddling through the first year of marriage has a way of turning New Zealand back into New Jersey, changing pink champagne into a juice box and transforming two immortal elves into lumpy humans with a rapidly approaching expiration date. Even after many satisfying years together, married life has an uncanny way of making even the most buoyant soul feel like a fool and a failure repeatedly. It's a feature, not a bug. Marriage is designed to break you. You will forget everything you knew before. You will tremble under the weight of your own shortcomings. Sure, you might bounce back and proclaim yourself lucky and declare your marriage happy and become the masochist that your marriage wants you to be. But you'll still wake up plenty of mornings wondering why you signed on to drag this wretched, snoring heap of meat with you everywhere you go until the day you die. And once you're married and therefore a true masochist, you'll realize that all of these sensations are part of the delicious tedium of matrimony. I wrote this book to explore that tedium along with everything else that marriage brings. The feeling of safety, the creeping darkness, the raw fear and suspense of growing older together. I'm not reading this right. The tiny repeating irritations, the rushes of love, the satisfactions of companionship, the unexpected rage of recognizing that your partner will probably never change. And in writing this book, I discovered new layers within my marriage and myself, haunting and chaotic, wretched and unlovable. We talk about marriage like it's just something people do, no big deal. We pretend that once you're married, you're either happy or unhappy, a binary system, on or off. But the truth is so much murkier and also much more frightening and exciting and joyful than that. Marriage grinds your face into the dirt until you can see new colors and taste new flavors. But you have to show up and invite it all in. You can't hide. I think that's probably enough for So now Tom, who I just found out is an Episcopalian, former or current, I'm not sure, is going to torment me with questions about how much I hate my husband, hopefully. That's why I chose a man, because that is your main concern, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have. Sorry, nothing. No way to get into the discussion and being up church full of people feeling totally unprepared for what we do.
I'm actually here to torment, I should say torment, another man, because that's my sick, sadistic, my compulsion.
Well, open with this question that you're hinting at here, which is how did you go about converting your personal experience, that's a highly personal and particular experience in this case, into a bill of the universal here? Like, how did you look around the house and be like, this is everyone?
Now see, I'm already unhappy with these questions. I'm just going to critique each question as we go. Okay, so basically, as someone who's written essays and nonfiction for years, and also as someone who has been forced to make a living in media since 1996, it kind of shapes you, as you well know yourself from your own such things as your own career. You become a person to whom sweeping statements are just second nature. Hot takes occur in the middle of the night. I don't know if you ever woke up in a cold sweat with a hot take and swimming around your brain, but that's a pretty sad sign that you've been working in media too long when you wake up thinking that way. So I've been making sweeping statements about my personal life for decades now. I did it freelance and unpaid in the beginning of my young adulthood, before anyone was, paying me word per word rate, and then it became professional and then therefore weaponized, and I think that it's weird because I never really set out to say, oh, I'm an expert of marriage now. I'm going to write a book about marriage. I'm married. I know everything about it. I'll tell everyone how it should be. But I did realize at some point, I'd written an essay about marriage for Adam Moss's last issue of New York Magazine. He asked me to write this essay about marriage, and I was sort of like, oh, that's so great. Like, I feel so honored to do this thing. And then I wrote the essay, and I was like, this is like one of the best things I've ever written. Why am I so good at writing about marriage? I asked myself. And then I was actually on the phone with an editor, and I had pitched a book that was about kind of like family comedy, right? The
Irma Bumpback.
silly snafus. Yeah, I love her. I read her as a kid.
Yeah, amazing stuff.
So I pitched this, and the editor was a man, and he said, well, that's a pretty, a field that's pretty full. And he sort of had this, like, he had this tone in his voice, like, I'm imagining, like, the comedy section in the back of a hoity-toity, bookstore that just has, like, cartoon drawings on the front, and it's like the novelty humor section. And he was like, it's kind of a full field, and it's sort of hard to market, And I was in an airport talking on the phone, and there's something about being in an airport when you're on the phone where you just feel so important. You're like, I'm talking to an editor from the airport, and I'm about to go to Australia. I was about to fly to Australia. So I was like, no, it's about the marriage. See, the marriage is at the center of it. Just like pulling this out of my butt because I'd just written this. Isn't that amazing that I just said butt instead of the other word that I could have said because we're in a church? That's called restraint, folks. But I said, yeah, it's about the marriage. The marriage is, and as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, can I really write a book? Can I really write a whole book about my marriage? This seems dumb. And he was like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. I kind of like that. So I went and retrofit my family comedy thing around marriage. unfortunately, then, right after that, I sold the book to a different editor, and that's where the tragedy begins, because that's when I said to myself, why did I sell a book about my marriage? That wasn't smart. I mean, I knew it would, yes, it's saleable, it is new. And it is true that I do find books on marriage almost like across the board to be intolerable and awful and just like shiny, sugar-coated nightmares. So I did feel like I had something to add in a genuine way. But the actual writing of the book was tremendously insane and difficult. And then COVID set in and I got cancer. Yay, sorry, spoilers. Yeah, it was this grueling, insane thing that I did. Somebody hit on me like weeks after I sold the book, and I was suddenly like, what is marriage anyway? Why not just... Maybe my book about marriage will be about destroying my marriage. Who knows? So yeah, it was a journey.
There's always a sequel. Well, as you...
Poor Tom, I'm sorry.
No, but on the question of how you approach your family as people you have to live with while you're turning into material, one striking thing about the story is that like Bill came to you as a reader, like he got like a fan letter. So in a way, he sort of asked for it, right? I mean, he's like, he comes to you and says like, you're the most amazing writer. I want to get to meet you. He's sort of begging to get himself written about in the end.
Yeah, and the first stuff that he read by me, the thing that really made him my little fanboy, which I still call him all the time.
As you should.
No, don't. But he read my mean-spirited cartoons, where I mocked my coworkers at Scocca, the online magazine that I wrote for in like 96 through 2001. So Bill was enamored of my sadism from a very early point in our relationship. And, I think, honestly, it is part of my writing that I'm a little bit merciless with myself and other people. I mean, I think that's, I would say, quality of my writing. Other people might say something disgusting and lamentable about it. But I think Bill always understood the tone of my stuff. So when I gave him the chapter just off the top of my head that New York Times excerpted that made so many people angry, he laughed, and he wasn't like, I want you to take this word phlegmy out of this chapter. So yeah, he's sort of a dream spouse as far as my having the freedom to be. But he was asking for it.
Yeah. Was there anything that he did sort of have reservations about in the book?
Did he,
I'm just trying to center the man here.
Yeah. Who doesn't want to center the man? I mean, we're in the house of God, he's man.
Yeah.
Let's see, are there any similar, out in the world, men are centered and we're in a patriarchy, yeah. So it's like, it's weird how
It's almost like there's an entire structure of domination.
domination, don't make it sound so hot, Tom. So let's see, I wonder what the question was.
Was there anything
Did he draw the line anywhere? A few people have asked me this, and each time I anew tried to like search my brain, scour my brain to see if there was anything. Sometimes he would say, "You make me sound better than I am."
Yeah, this is...
Perhaps he has low self-esteem, but... I do think that people who finish the book are sort of enamored of Bill, which was really my goal. I didn't want to, aside from the phlegm, I didn't really want to... obviously there's I think the scene that embarrasses him the most is the engagement scene, where...
Right.
It's funny that I call it a scene.
It's like a
real thing.
Right.
But you know, he did turn to me and say, as you know, we've known each other for a long time now.
Right. Which you told him not to do.
I was like, please don't. Every single thing that I'd specifically said, please don't engage, don't pop the question. Okay, so engagements are dumb,
Yes.
right? And popping a question is weird. Like, surprise! It's so archaic, actually. And I bought into that so much. And it's weird to think about, like, why? You know, now I just would be like, yeah, we're gonna get married, right? Okay, we're done. It's fine. Or I would have asked him, or I don't know. But at the time, I was like, I need a fountain with elephants and fireworks going off, you know. And I had all these like conditions, but I felt so demeaned by having to explain what I wanted. You know, that's very like pre-married. That you're like, it's so beneath me that I have to tell you what I want right now, you know? And then, you know, once you're married for a while, yeah, read my mind. I mean, that is what romance is. You're supposed to be reading each other's minds. But once you're married for a while, a functional marriage is all about being excruciatingly detailed with someone about what you want and very direct about it. And polite. You can be polite when you think you have a right to say in detail what you want. So many themes to explore, I don't know.
Well, what's striking about some of the fight scenes in the book is that, like, you're very forthright about when you're feeling like Bill is not going to perceive your feelings on a subject as rational. You have it's sort of a good. I feel like people could use the book to develop their own scripts for how to like tell someone, look, you may think that this is insane and you might be objectively correct, but you're still going to have to like accept that this is what you're dealing with, because like you sign on with a human being and that's how this human being functions, and you need to like adapt to that reality.
Yeah. It's like you're saying. Now you have entered an alternative reality. You know, it's like, welcome to my country. Here's how we do things here, kind of. And I mean, it's normal early in a marriage to say, that makes no sense. You know, men often, not to just be the most gender essentialist human alive, but they will often say, that makes no sense that you feel that way. You know, you'll be like, I just feel, you know, or it makes me anxious that we're doing X, Y, Z. And they'll say, but that's irrational. That makes no sense. And you're kind of like, that's so helpful. You're right.
This is good. This makes me feel like I have a gender egalitarian marriage.
Honey, I'm so glad you said calm down and told me that I was being irrational, because now I realize, stop, Heather, stop. Be more of a, what's the word for someone who's logical? Logician? Someone said Bill looked like Scocca online, so on Twitter. He is. But yeah, you have these conversations where you have to say, look, I mean, I do think it's kind of a breakthrough method. It's like the I'm crazy method of communicating. Like, oh yeah, you know, if you want to see all this is crazy, go right ahead. Like, woo! But it's not going to change. I'm not going to like feel differently about certain things. The one conversation that I had with him that you're talking about, where early on in the book, or we just had a baby, and he was holding the baby while stirring a boiling pot, and our baby was, her limbs were dangling on his forearm like this. He was stirring with his other, and he was talking to Zeke, my stepson, who was like 8, blah, 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 blah. And I walked in, it was the first time I'd ever left the house, without the baby.
That's what it's going to be like when you let him have some responsibility for this new baby.
Yeah, and I want him. Yeah, and I was like, my future is hell. I mean, that early in a marriage, you have a lot of times when you say, this is the rest of my life right here. You know, I'm so screwed right now. So I was furious immediately, and his son is there, and I was like, we're gonna have to talk now. And he was like, calm down, it's fine. And I was like, whoa. That's not gonna work. But I said, we had this long conversation, it actually went well. I said, like, it's like you're holding my liver over that boiling pot. Like, it's part of me. It's been inside my, that human being has been inside my body. It sounds insane now. But yeah. And you know, I wanted to include that in the book because it's important to assert when you know the stakes are so high and it's in a relationship, when you're dealing with something that's really, you know the kind of conversation you have when you're fighting, when someone's like, I hate that you did this thing, and your reaction is, uh-oh, I don't think I can stop myself from doing that. You know, you're like, I would really, and you have to actually say, like, I'm panicking because you're asking me to stop doing something that I feel like might be a core part of my personality. You know, which is terrible. And it's humiliating and embarrassing to land in a place. I mean, if anything, my book is really about, like, running up against the limits of, or just the failures, or just looking straight at your flaws and just saying, oh no, like, I'm not good enough for this. Like, I don't think I can pull this off. I think I might be too unlovable to be married, you know? And I mean, I think...
You've not done it. So, like, you're in a contractual relationship with somebody now. Like, you have to, like...
Yeah.
You're going to have to, like, negotiate did he buy the extended warranty on your, like, moods? Or?
This is going to be expensive. Yeah, I mean, that it's a real come to Jesus moment when you realize I'm not going to become better just because I'm found a great person. We're both going to have to grapple with the fact that I'm not as good as I advertised myself to be. I tricked this human being into thinking I could do this. And I mean, I think both people generally have, I mean, in my marriage at least, and I'm not going to speak for all marriages, but I think that, you know, we both, if we have a fight, after the fight we tend to have a conversation about, I felt like I was letting you down, you know? I mean, that's always like the root feeling of like, I feel like I'm not good enough to do this. So yeah, and I actually think that you don't necessarily just move from that place and say, I'll fix it. You know, it's like, oh, we'll never fix this. Is actually like a conversation that you have once your marriage is pretty good. You know, like, you kind of realize that your marriage is in a good place when you're like, oh, hot damn, we're never going to fix this. There are ways you can recreate us fighting, you know, like, we can be, you give people 2 teenagers and an international flight, you know, and something goes wrong, the flight's delayed, and you're just going to both be, you know, your wiring is going to start smoking, and there's no, you know, it's just like, uh-oh. I mean, the best you can do a lot of times is just like, wow, we've landed in that bad place where we're both at our worst. And if you can even say that in words, you're in a great, that's excellent.
Yeah, the ability to say, like, wow, this is bad. That's incredibly helpful.
We're both in trouble now.
Yeah. That's what you have to look forward to.
Tell us about your marriage, Tom.
What would you like to? It's
How long have you been married? We're just gonna walk through the audience and.
It's 2022. So 21 years.
Oh, that's a long time.
Well, we started dating 29 years ago this week. So yeah.
You know a lot about this book.
Well, it was funny reading it from like the sort of perspective of, you know, somebody who just sort of like paired off early and has stayed paired off, and you know, if you were coming into this, he had already been married before, you know, you were in your 30s, it was like, you know, you had sort of these different frames on it, but the milestones are pretty, you know, the moment that you are like, what the hell are we doing with this wedding? Or that delightful moment after the second child when you realize that you've just like smashed everything that you had put together into a new ruin that you're gonna have to reassemble.
Yeah.
And when you can see your mother was the one there very much than your mother-in-law, but I felt that scene felt very very vivid to me.
Yeah. That was my mom. But I mean, I think that, I feel like, yeah, luckily, I mean, with a mother-in-law, we'd be divorced. There was no, my husband's parents have both passed away, so I guess, I mean, that's not a blessing, but.
I mean, you have your interaction with the.
See how bad, I mean, it's amazing that I even wrote a book, right? Like, how did anyone even let me write a book?
Well, you do have your interaction with your in-laws in the book with the extended family.
Yeah.
Feeling particularly vulnerable to judgment and their radiating judgment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's kind of, I mean, parenting is a thing that you feel a lot of other people's judgments naturally, because you kind of always feel like you're not getting it quite right, and there always seems to be an audience around for parenting. And marriage, I actually feel, is somewhat similar, especially around your immediate family. Holidays are hard in part once you're married, because you're supposed to go and be with your family of origin that gave you all the problems you have, and then demonstrate that you've overcome everything that you learned from that, and you know, everyone's trying to demonstrate their version of what they've overcome in their own way. And they're of course, because siblings are always different, it's like, yeah, it's just a circus, it's a clown show. I think that one thing that's, now I lost my train of thought. See, this is what happens.
Extended family. The holidays.
Just keep saying random words.
Car trip, no, that's a different thing in the book.
Yeah, the car trip. Yeah. You're the guide, I'm just a follower. Ask me a question, Tom, I don't know, where are we?
Well,
We're in a church.
I guess the sort of first big reaction to the book was the Times excerpt. Were you surprised about how that went over?
No, I mean, I sold the book in 2019, and I sort of wrote a draft of it that year, and then I had a lot of time to sort of my editor took some time to edit it, because we were in the middle of COVID and people were taking a lot of time to just exist at that time, because it was a rough time. And so I had a lot of time to sort of reflect on what I'd done. You know, it was sort of like you turn in this manuscript that's extremely personal, and then you're alone in your house with your marriage, and you're, you know, with your husband and your kids, and you're sort of like, well, do I want to let everyone know the truth about how terrible I am. Is that my goal? And I started to observe the way that people talk about marriage, you know, from day to day in the culture, and the way people talk about failed marriages. I mean, the word failed marriage kind of makes no sense even in and of itself. It's like, one of you failed to die. You quit before one of you was dead. You cheater. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like you can look at a marriage and say, this isn't working, let's do the mature thing and walk away. That's good. But no, I mean, one of the things that I objected to about people were talking, I won't even go into that. I just don't believe that if you're married 15 times, you're more of a failure than someone who's never been married or has been with the same person and manages to die without married, you know. Success, a victor, a winner. I feel like, okay, what I was saying was, oh yeah, I had time to think about that I'd made a mistake, and I observed the culture and I saw how moralistic we are about parenting relationships and how you should behave within a relationship. And in fact, Ask Polly was, my advice column, was incredibly self-righteous and moralistic about marriage. For years, I loved to there was one guy wrote to me and said, I want to cheat on my wife. I mean, he was kind of a dick, let's be real. But I was like, listen up, you know? So, I feel like marriage really changes your views of marriage. And the thing that's terrible about trying to communicate this is you end up sounding like such a wizened old cynic, but that's not really the full picture. It's sort of like, I love my marriage. It's amazing. I'm really happy to be married to the person I'm married to, but there's a way that your ideas about what, you know, other people's, what you see in the culture, other people get divorced, people cheat on each other, all kinds of things happen. Your ideas about why they happen shift 100%. You go from saying, that's just sick, you know, he just met some floozy, he left his good wife, you know, and instead when you hear stories you think, I wonder how that really went. I mean, part of the reason I wrote this book was we don't know how anything is really going. You know, we don't have a sense of what's going on behind closed doors at all. It's the most private thing, marriage. People are so precious about it. So I observed this for like a year, and then I was like, oh God. Like there was a time when I just said to Bill, you really should brace yourself. Like, this is going to be bad. Like, if it's popular, which we want, it's going to be a nightmare. Because people don't like ambivalence around marriage at all. It's like a sin.
Right. You need to form strong opinions about other people's, so you feel that your own opinions of your own must be stronger too.
Yeah, I mean, are you living right or wrong is sort of the question of our moment, in a way. Or are you healthy or are you not healthy? And we each get to decide about everybody else and loudly proclaim it, you know, on social media.
I also feel like there's probably a certain amount of context collapse around the Times thing, and that, like, you know, when you narrow it down from the larger book, and you're just giving people an excerpt, I think people are just sort of wired from experience, some of them, that, like, if they hear mommy saying daddy is gross and repulsive and is, you know, a laundry, like, they remember when that was real around the house.
My kids consider that a joyful experience, but I know what you mean. No, I mean, I think Yeah, it's true. But see, this is why women are held to such weirdly Messiah-like standards in all things, because we have such close. There was a book by Nancy Chodorow about the fact that women mother in our society. I mean, it's somewhat less true these days than when she wrote the book in, I think, 70s or 80s. I don't know years. But the fact that women mother and we develop intimate relationships with our mothers, and fathers are this distant, idealized thing, it creates this sort of revulsion around women, because women are we're connected, and everything that we fail to become or fail to feel is associated with any slippage within that relationship creates resentment and contempt. Whereas the man gets to be this, distant, delicious, wanted thing, and the woman is like, oh, you made me eat my beans, And I mean, I feel like there are echoes to that in the reaction to this book, It's like, oh, another woman talking about what's wrong with some man like me.
Yeah, I mean, I thought your response to the Times review was extremely generous. Perhaps to the point of cruelty.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I might write an evil treatise about that review at some point. You're not really supposed to do that, but I mean, sometimes if you're good at writing, sometimes you convince yourself that you should write all kinds of things, because
and sometimes
you're very convincing.
Sometimes you should, though. This is part of the there's like the advice columnist paradox too. Like, you can get away with stuff. Like your advice to other people about how much of their family business they should air out in the New York Times is probably not a matter of telling them to follow your example, because you put a lot of work into setting it up there, and I think part of the other context thing is just 95% of the personal essays that people put in the New York Times about their loved ones are just clearly you should have taken this to your therapist. And you don't even know actually what the problem you're describing in this piece is, although I can tell you.
Yeah. You're talking about modern love.
Yes. The modern love is the frame that everybody sees any personal essay in the Times from, the fact that.
I'm gonna step up right here, right now, just be a little bit mean and say, modern love as a genre, that genre of essay is bad. It's not good. A lot of modern loves are actually horrendously bad. Yeah. And often they turn into whole books that are also not just bad, but awful books. It should not have even been a modern love in the first. I mean, it was a modern love, because defining it as a modern love, right. I didn't really know this until I was like, I should write a modern love, because once you write a modern love, you've got a book, and the book sells. That's how it works. And I started reading modern loves, and I was like, I don't want to write a modern love. That's the last thing I want to write, because modern loves are unresolved snippets of just strings of thoughts about emotional experiences, and then something happens that's almost like a deus ex machina. I never knew how to pronounce that. And then it's like, and I didn't know what to do, and it was never resolved, and oh well, that's how it ends. And you're like, what is this?
Well, that's how it ends on the page, though. The implicit message is that the real way it ends is that they're just taking it to a million people in the newspaper, right? It's the modern love is the ultimate act of escalation in your relationship right now. You're you had your fight, but not satisfied. So what if you could have your plate again in front of a million people?
Well, see, it was the modern love training, the bad modern love training that made that people unable to digest my coherent, concise, vivid illustration, a truly good essay.
I think that's actually accurate.
I blame Daniel, what's his name? The editor of Modern Love.
Yeah.
Let's get personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's me, sorry, Daniel.
Divorce him.
So, I mean, we're okay, right? Are we rambling on?
I feel like we should probably take a couple questions.
Okay, we're going to take some questions. But I would just say that, yeah, I mean, writing about relationships, to me, should be entertaining. And, I mean, my goal with the book was to make it that you would start reading and be strapped into this terrible roller coaster, that would eventually crash into a brick wall, which is a good metaphor for marriage. And that's what I wanted. But I mostly just wanted it to feel real and juicy and strange and awkward and awful, and also loving and exciting and comforting. Feeling was I wanted it to be emotionally propulsive, this book. And I think I've at least pulled that off. Whether you land in a place where you hate where you've been, or you love where you've been, again, a good metaphor for marriage. So, yeah. But taking one piece of that out of context, was risky. And that's okay. I mean, I think that things that are interesting make people angry these days, really. I mean, there aren't that many interesting things that people don't get pissed off about right now. And you know what? The culture's really effing boring. I can't believe I said effing. Wow. The culture is boring right now because people are careful, and I think that's going to change. It's very dull. I think it goes without saying that 1,000,001 great things have come out of people being more careful and not being their usual asshole selves. Oops. But I think that people are impatient and bored, and they want more interesting, vivid, modern loves. And so,
What if they've all learned to be completely respectful and communicative with each other? And they're out there just living lives that aren't going to generate any
well,
more
you know what? It's funny you mention that, because there was a point when you were talking about, of course, marriage is this way. I back you up, kind of. And I was thinking, it is true though. Like, I do think that it's important to say there are the kinds of people who relitigate things every day and say, like, am I in the right place? Am I happy enough? Who just enjoy or don't enjoy interrogating everything they do. And I do think that there are people who are like, I'm in a good marriage. Thank God I met a good woman. And they just, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's amazing. I mean, I do think that there are people who are legitimately bewildered by the way that I describe marriage because they just don't encounter it as a question. It's just an exclamation point. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's amazing to live that way, I think. I mean, there are people who wake up every morning, okay, we're in New York, so I can say, you guys, listen, you're not going to believe this. But there are people who wake up every morning feeling grateful to be alive. And grateful to be sleeping next to the snoring, stinky heap of meat next to them. Amazing. I mean, it's true. It really is true. I've seen some glimpses of it. I don't know how it feels. But yeah, I mean, and I'm not cynical about that. I think I like people who are like that. I think it's great. My aspiration is to be more like that, for sure. But I'm just the kind of person, and I think a lot of us are, who I have to be honest to get there. The more honest I am, the closer I get to gratitude. And I think that's how a lot of us function, actually. It's like the more you forgive yourself for being a worm, the more grateful you are that you're a worm. Isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful.
So we're gonna take questions from our audience.
If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and line up right here.
Or we'll just, anyone that comes up, we'll just interrogate you about the state of your marriage or what you want for marriage if you eventually do get married. No, we won't do that.
All right, I think, oh, okay, somebody has a question back there. You can come to the microphone. We have a live stream going, so if you want to come to the microphone, that'd be great. Thanks.
It's a really nice audio-visual system. I think everyone here should try it. It just gives you like a nice little boost in your voice without feeling like you're in some weird.
This?
Yes.
Oh, that.
It gives you like it's a little bit more. You can have that like, little feeling where you feel alienated from your voice.
I feel like the echo is a little much. It's a little bit. I wish that the ceiling needs to come down at least. They gotta take this down in the renovation.
Have a word with the Pope.
Hello. First of all, just thank you. I love that excerpt so much, and I got to read the book, which I love, and I just feel like the fact that you were able to talk, to be as honest as you were, besides just being like refreshing and funny, like just gives people space to feel complex emotions and ambivalence without feeling like there's something wrong with us or whatever. So I just wanted to first of all, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I was gonna say, is there a question?
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out like what exactly the question. Why do you hate your husband? The thing that was really striking to me, and that I'm sort of trying to figure out the question about it, is that like I thought like Bill came across very, very well in your book. That was really obvious, and that you're much harder on yourself. And what was striking to me about some of the criticisms and the reviews is that like that was like totally not worth a mention. Like it seems fine for women to beat themselves up. Just don't say anything about your husband's phlegm or whatever, but like it's okay to like, we're a lot harder on yourself by a lot than on Bill. So I'm not sure exactly what I wanted to ask there, but
Why is that? I mean, that is a question. Because like, is that how it should be?
like why is that
right?
okay? Yeah.
Like why do we not even notice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's strange to grow up with your weird overcompensations, right? I mean, my self-deprecation is definitely a complicated defense mechanism. It's like you anticipate what other people might say about you. I think part of it is if you're kind of determined to have, if you're kind of a show-off, as I am, and you're determined to have a big personality, or at least that's kind of like what some core part of you wants, you sort of like always feel like, but I want people to really know me. That's kind of like a core trait of a writer, I think. At least a writer that writes emotional things. And I actually realized, but I mean, if you want people to know you, you're always kind of showing your ass. And then you're always trying to cover up your ass or deal with the humiliation of showing your ass, and address the things that people have to say about what you showed them, And a lot of people don't want to know other people at all. So people don't like you, not just because you're unlikable, which is a possibility always, but also just because you're a woman who's showing herself. I mean, a lot of people don't like women. This has been my experience. Women and men and all genders under the sun, a lot of them don't like women. So in some ways I think sometimes you develop self-deprecation as a way of anticipating the fact that no one's going to really like you. You just don't think, you can't believe, and you'd rather say it first than hear it. You're so used to hearing it after the fact, you know, or suspecting. Now, is this just anxious attachment? Maybe. That's probably a piece of it. But, you know, these weird defense mechanisms and overcompensations that you develop that become part of your personality, eventually you sort of start to celebrate them. And I think in this book, I did kind of feel like it's kind of a freedom to be able to say, my husband is kind of like Queen Elizabeth, and I'm a little bit like Prince Philip. You know, like, it's sort of fun and it feels good to be like, oh yeah, I'm the overly critical idiot, you know, prince.
Who's worshipped on certain Pacific islands as a god.
Is he?
Yeah. There's like
This really does fit.
Yeah, he sailed through in 1973, and like he just happened to be the right man at the right time, and he's like the volcano god's brother, and
Whoa.
yeah, it's a whole thing. There's a whole. They would send him stuff, and he'd like write them letters back.
See, that would never happen to a woman.
It's true that the history of these certain events is mostly about.
Why does it all fit together so neatly? Thank you for that. I really didn't mean, is there a question? That was such a nice thing to say. Thank you so much for the last interaction. That was really nice. I appreciate that. Hi.
Hi. I am wondering what you did, if you did anything, physically and emotionally, to disentangle yourself from your husband while you were writing. From thinking about your roles together, thinking about him and thinking about you. How did you pull yourself back out when you needed to, especially with the pandemic going on?
That's such a good question. That's a very insightful question. How did I disentangle myself from my marriage enough to write about it? I think that, well, I mean, I had this crush. Disastrous subject. I sold the book. Somebody hit on me. I developed a crush. And then I kind of ignored it for a while. And then...
This is an extremely good part of the book.
and then I suddenly started to think about it. I was suddenly like, oh, this crush has some, you know, like, that guy who hit on me, I wonder what he's all about. What's the story there, you know? How do I, what's his deal anyway? That guy who just thinks I'm so great. Just wants me so bad. Why? What does he want so much? Why can't I just have a little conversation with him where he tells me some of the many things that he likes a lot? I wonder if you could go into detail about that over a drink, just a fun little platonic drink. So my mind was, you know, I started to create with using my mind, create a story. I basically wrote a short story about an imagined person that had nothing to do with, I barely knew the person involved, barely. And that was a way of getting distance from my husband while I was writing the book, actually. I mean, here I had this big project about my marriage, and I started it, and it was like, this is your chapter where you talk about falling in love with your husband and why he's the perfect person for you. And I was like, ew, who wants to write that? That's boring, you know? That's like a happy modern love, the worst kind of modern love. I'm above that. It should be more interesting than that. And so I probably kind of subconsciously fed this wild, insane. And I just started Ask Molly, the evil twin of Ask Polly newsletter. And so I had this place to put wicked thoughts. And I really kind of grew a wicked thought garden. And had a lot of fun there. And it was, I actually kind of feel like it stayed with me. The crush is dead. It's like, the other day I was talking to Bill about it, and I said, trying to revive my crush is like picking a dead bird off the ground and putting it in a shoebox. Like, I kind of want it to come alive again because it was so fun, but I can't. It's dead. But I recommend the imaginative side of it, actually. Like, the way that I basically developed an inner life of a certain kind, like a creative inner life, that had its own kind of juice and excitement to it. And it eventually detached from the idea of this person and just became my thing, which was awesome. It took a long time, and I don't recommend the various humiliations and risks involved of that path, but that it was a self-protective. I mean, I think that within marriage we constantly move into a self-protective space because it's too much, you know? It's like, it's as much as it is to be alive. If you're fully feeling your emotions and feeling your body's desires, and you're with another person that you depend on, and you really, if you effectively feel your love for another person, you're at great risk all the time. You're like a baby being held over a boiling pot, actually. And you naturally just want protection from that, you know? You don't want to feel that way because it's vulnerable. So I love that question. I love that question. And I do think that there's value in being in that heightened, vulnerable state where you want more. It doesn't have to be melancholy. It's actually like this life-giving force to live inside that space. But it is a fine line, because if you drum up your longing too much, you're like this itch that needs to be scratched. What now? I deserve to. I should be on that island where they're worshiping me. You know. I mean, you can be, and you're obnoxious and annoying too. So I do recommend starting a Substack, putting it there, your imaginary realm. Find some really good artwork, and then the rest of your life you can just be like making quesadillas for the kids and shit.
I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, as well as obviously Heather and Tom for that very entertaining talk. That was great. I just wanted to say one more time that we have signed copies of Foreverland over at the check-in table where you came in, and if you'd like to pick up an extra copy, that is where you can do it. All right, one last, let's have like a really big round of applause for Heather and Tom.